Now let's take a look at the lower leg. But we don't want to take a look at the details of the lower leg because that's just like staring into complexity. You don't really want to jump into all of that, deal with the frustration and trying to put all of the pieces together. We want to try to look at this in an organized way. So this is representative of a stage 3 lower leg. At this point, we've got a very general shape. We've got essential characteristics, though. We have a high point and a high point. We've got some straight lines coming in, allowing us to really emphasize some of the bony characteristics. We have a wedge here in the front, which represents the tendons moving towards the toes. But what does a stage 3 look like? I'm sorry, a stage 1. This is the essential, very core form for the lower leg. We're looking at a sphere and a box. That's it. Now we have some angles to this box, but the essential characteristic is a sphere and a cube. End of story. And if we rotate this around, you see the same thing. The upper part is representative of the muscle. In this case, the gastrocnemius, soleus, as well as the body of the tibialis, fibularis. All of the body of the muscles is happening up here. The majority of the body, anyways. The lower part, that's representative of bone. So that's representative of the tibialis and the fibularis. That's just representative of simple bones. And bone means blocky cubes, simple shapes like that. The stage 2 is where we start to take the surface or the sphere that we have and we start to define specific planes. We start to round things, create a flat plane, but most significantly, we cut out the line of the tibia. This line of the tibia is incredibly important. It's the shin. If you touch your shin right now, you'll see it's paper thin. The skin is right in touch with the bone. There's no muscle covering it up. No matter how big you get, the shin is always going to show. It can get crowded, but it's still going to show. Still going to be there. So this is really one of the first things that we do. So when we're talking about a stage 2, we're really talking about the line of the tibia. That's getting revealed. And then we start to round into the tibia. It's not enough to just put the tibia in there. We also need to round into it, which is the rounding that you experience here. And then we also need to round out of it. So we need to, from a inside perspective, we need to be addressing how the form transitions. Notice that we have very distinct lines, places where the form breaks. These lines right here and right here are representative of the gastrocnemius muscle. The soleus is going to be representative of this muscle inside here, which is something that we would look at in stage 3. So come into stage 3, and you can see we have now just started to be a little bit softer in the way we treat the form. We've also made sure to add a wedge, and you can see some suggestion of other muscles in there. We don't need to be very specific though. It's really important to keep that in mind. I would prefer that you keep sphere, box in mind, and then just add that wedge. Then in the next week, we start to look at the individual muscles and how those fit in. So let's piece this together. Let me show you how I create this. I'm going to go straight to, let's go to a muscle above it. Okay. We're going to make sure that we have a polysphere loaded, which you can just do by going to Tool, Polysphere. Make sure it's not Sphere 3D. It has to be Polysphere. Append that to your model. And then we need to make sure that we can see it. So I'm going to press F, select it. We don't really care about symmetry at this point. We just need to scale it down. Move it down. Okay. Get a good bulk. I think that's good enough. But now we're going to deform it ever so slightly and make it longer. Put it towards the back. So if we had to analyze this, we'll put the bone in red. You can see that this muscle is definitely tending towards the back half. That's the way it goes. But we do like to have a little bit, this is going to be the tibialis actually, a little bit up in the front. What you want to also keep in mind though is that the tibia, the lower leg, is going to be divided really by half. That's the measurement that we use here. So 0.5 of that, half of that is muscle, half of that is bone. Just a nice round average number for us to use. Now we need to bring a cube into this. And you can just load a polycube. If I remember right, they keep the polycube in the image plane folder. And then append that. I'm going to use deformation size this time. And then I'll just use the move option here. Just get it sitting, resting on the foot. And you need to tilt it to accommodate that natural gesture. And tilt it forward slightly. Well, that's not as essential. In fact, we could simply blossom it. Mask half, move, and then pull out just like that. There we go. Invert that, and we can shrink this a little bit. And what I really want to make sure about is that I have some of the bone showing outside of the muscle that I'm putting in here. So that's really key in order for us to get this clearly delineated. Okay, divide this. And you have a very simple representation. check your measurements. Need to make that calf a little bit bigger, and then we're just going to merge all of this together. To merge it, you just press merge down. We were able to keep the subdivision levels because they were at the same subdivision level when we merged them. So keep that in mind. But that's what I would call a stage 1. It's very simple, very easy, and from a distance that reads. That feels like a lower leg. And what are the most important defining characteristics for this? Well, in my view, one of the most important defining characteristics is this outward angle and bend, as well as dunk and in. And then this natural axis, very important axis to keep in mind, needs to be there, but also needs to be set up correctly. So you need to make sure that the soleus is doing its business. And this is what we end up doing here in a little bit. You can see if we do this in red as well. You can see the natural gesture of it. We're capturing that in these simple forms. So now I want to sculpt stage 2. And when I get to stage 2, I want to just show you a really neat trick. So this is just a ZBrush trick. We're going to remesh this. So I'm going to turn Remesh X off. I'm in the Subtool palette. I'm going to leave everything at default and just say Remesh. Okay, it creates this remeshed form, but it looks kind of bad. So we're going to make sure that the only other subtool that's visible is the polysphere, the one that we originally created. Let's divide this remeshed model once and then project all. Again, all we're doing, we're making sure that these two are the only visible. Okay, then we divide this guy once, and then we press project all. And that has created one unified mesh that has the form and the shape that I need. Now we can make the bone visible. We can divide this one more time. And let's get on to stage 2. So what were the important parts for stage 2? The shin, or as we said before, the line of the tibia. That needs to be exposed. We also need to start to define some of the arcs. So where's the gastrocnemius, and how does this round in to the line of the tibia? So as simple as this would be, we use trim dynamic. I'm going to lower that subdivision level, or the clay brush, and you just push until you find the line of the tibia. Find it all the way up and down. That's done. Trim dynamic is now the key. And we're going to now round this. The goal being to just cut some of this extra form off. Notice that we do reach a point here where we just don't want to round it anymore. This is going to help us define where the gastrocnemius muscle is going to be. Soleus is going to move forward from that, and then we have the rest of our muscles from there. So that's going to be a pretty decent run for me. Now I'm going to come in and define the inside corner, and then everything just gets simplified. And this doesn't have to take long. And that would be stage 2. Now, let's go up to stage 3. Stage 3, if you remember right, we start to be more specific. And so at this point, we need to start talking about the origin of muscles. So the origin of the gastrocnemius muscle is over the knee joint. It is connecting to the femur. Muscles by nature really need to bridge joints in order for them to act on it. So we're going to just a tiniest bit bridge that. Notice the V shape. It comes down halfway. And there we go. We've already got this kind of set up. Just like that. And then the soleus is going to come behind that. Continue our line downwards. So what we need to do is be moving the gastrocnemius up. So we're going to pull some vertices upwards. That's the first step. I like move elastic for that. Great. Okay, we can also use the standard brush to just really cut in. The goal here is to really separate these guys. Well, let's make sure that they actually originate in the correct place. Cut right down the center to divide these guys. We want to define how much of an overlap we're going to get. So here is our bone, tibia, the muscle, just a little bit, and then the meat of the muscle is going to be more at the bottom. So you're going to trim all of that. Clay brush, I'm going to add a little hit down here, add a little hit here, trim dynamic brush to just plane these a little bit. Okay, and then I like to define the tibialis. This is one muscle that's going to be running along the tibia, the body of which would be right here. It's tendons moving downwards, and then along the bone you can see it just coming underneath the inside of the foot. So I like to just define that briefly. Okay, that's defined. And now down here along the bottom, this is where we're going to get the extensor digitorum longus, which is going to be pulling outwards. This is going to give us a little wedge. And I'm going to use the clay brush to build that up. Doesn't have to be pretty. You just want some indicator that there is going to be a small change to your slope here. M polish is always a good one to just help you get these clean. And then we have a stage 3, sorry. Let's check. If you make any mistakes like I did, cheat with the move brush and fix them. But this will get us ready for when we need to go in and start to define some of these individual muscles, all of this stuff that gets a little bit on the crazy side. You can see I'm thinning this ever so slightly, especially on this female. And just continuing that natural gesture upwards. All right. So again, stay focused on just the simplicity of form. And then once we have that down, we're going to start to analyze and break it up into more complexity.